David, you've recently had some video footage of your stroke done, of course, but let's just see if we can identify the stroke. Here we go. So you know that your right arm tends to stall out in front of your head a little bit. The best angle to view that from, you certainly see it from here. You see how the elbow drops, but probably the best angle to look at this from, when viewed from above, is just up at the top here. Now, what we need to be very careful about is having these two hands come in so close together that it almost looks like we're doing a catch-up. So within the swimming literature, one of the things that a lot of people talk about, this idea of front quadrant freestyle swimming. It's important to ensure that one arm is always in front of that yellow line at any one point in time. Even the greatest swingers in the world, who tend to have more of like a rotary style, will still have support with that lead arm out in front of that line. The problem we get to, though, is if those two hands come so close together that they're almost catching up, we've potentially got a dead spot within the stroke where you're not actually producing any forward propulsion. Some swimmers compensate for that by kicking a bit harder. Sometimes swimmers have like a stall at the front and what we call a kick start. Let me just show you this here. Right? Underneath the water. So this swimmer here had been instructed to lengthen out the stroke as much as he possibly can and combine it with a 2-beat leg kick. But it was an absolute disaster for the way he was swimming. Let's watch it here. Look. Very slow stroke rate indeed. You can see here he's actually stalling at the front of the stroke. Now he's trying to combine it with a supposedly quite an efficient 2-beat leg kick. But that leg kick there is not efficient at all. Look at how low the knee drops down in the water. It creates a significant amount of drag. So you might be not doing much effort with the legs, but the legs without him realising actually creating a lot of drag, and it's actually slowing you down quite a bit. So sometimes when you're looking for the effect of like a pause at the front, this kick start, as we call it, the overglider kick start, might be evident within the stroke. Shorky, if we bring you in just alongside, oops. Oh, crash, sorry. Let's go side-by-side comparison, David and Sharky here. Now, both of you, to a greater or lesser extent, have a little bit of an issue with a bit of a pause within the stroke. David, you're swimming at, 60 strokes per minute, which is fine, that's 60 strokes per minute. Sharky, you're swimming at 52 strokes per minute. When we view it from the top, for David on the right here, look, it's not a massive overglide, but it just looks like it sort of pauses and then restarts. You can see it a little bit more clearly on the last lap. See how that right arm, it comes in and it almost looks like you consciously thinking about what to do next. So it's a stop and then a pull through. Stop and then a pull through. What we find with a lot of overgliders is when they do that, it compromises the integrity of the catch, because when the hand stalls there, you have to then pull through very, very quickly, as opposed to allowing the hand to come in. A true smooth would come in, catch the water and actually spend the time on the catch, not spend the time patiently leaving that arm out there in front of the head. Now, Shoki, if we look at yourself, and we take that same view from above, we've also got this issue, look, where the hand just remains out in front of the head too long, arguably a little bit more so than David, and that's the reason why your stroke rate is a little bit on the lower side. So what we need to work on in both cases is making sure the lead arm, and for both of you it's the right arm, making sure that lead arm doesn't stall out in front of the head quite so long. Now we'll come back to and do a proper analysis on yours in just a moment, but I once had a gentleman for a session. This is prior to actually releasing Swim Types a few years ago now, and he came for a session with me and said, I don't know what's going wrong. I've been swimming 4 or 5 times per week, swimming 2 or 3 Ks per session. I've been doing that for 5 years. And he said, I'm not getting any faster at all. In fact, I'm getting slower. I said, okay, what sort of times are you doing? He said, I can swim 25 minutes. And I just assumed that for somebody who's been swimming for 5 years, that frequently during the session, he meant 25 minutes for 1,500 metres. He actually meant 25 minutes for a kilometre. So this guy in this video clip is averaging 2 minutes 30 per 100 metres, and he's been swimming for 5 years. Just before he sets off, he says, I can't understand it. I can do 28 strokes per 50. He says, that's better than Ian Thorpe. That's what he said to me. In my head, I'm thinking, it can't be better than Ian Thorpe. If Ian Thorpe's swimming 2.5 times quicker, but remember the shit sandwich. You don't want to, we've got a positive, constructive, positive. Let's look at him swimming here. From the side, you'll see a very graceful looking freestyle stroke, nice high elbows. But something about it looks altogether slow, especially when viewed from the top. So let's have a little look here.
Is this like real time?
This is real time. The stroke looks okay from the surface, but look at it here now. So in the same way that Shorky was pausing out in front of his head a little bit too long, David, to a lesser extent, his left arm stays out here too long. Look what happens with the legs. He's actually stalled completely in the water, so he's doing what we call an overglider kickstart just to get himself going again. He's also rotating to 90 degrees on every single stroke. He said that's what he'd been instructed to do. The two hands clearly catch each other up at the front end of the stroke. Now, I've been going through stroke rates for each of you here. This guy's stroke rate, he might be doing 28 strokes per length, but his stroke rate is a very, very low 33 strokes per minute. Watch him underneath the water. This is not efficient freestyle swimming. Now, he says he likes to take this pause and rest at the front end of the stroke, so it gives him a little bit of rest time. But as we know, water is 800 times more dense than air. Okay, the last thing you want to be doing is stalling at the front. You're simply going to slow down. So we end up getting a series of stalls and accelerate, stall and accelerate, and it leads to very, very slow, inefficient swimming indeed. When viewed from the front, underneath the water, you see how that left arm just hangs there, look. Not only that, but you see how the hand is very, very loose, limp and relaxed. There's no tone to it. It's like when he starts to pull through, it's like this, as opposed to that nice, powerful position that we saw with Rebecca Adlington. Now, he's modelled himself supposedly on swimmers like Ian Thorpe with their low stroke counts, but unfortunately, without recognising the other side of the equation, the stroke rate, how many times turning his arms over per minute. Now, the really interesting thing about this video is that when I took him for the session afterwards, I said to him, look, you've got a slow stroke rate, we need to work on that. The way we're going to work on it is by improving the way you're catching and pulling through and not stalling out in front. And it went against everything he had ever heard before, everything he had ever read before. One of the drills that we focused on, and this is a really good drill to do with somebody who if you ever see them swimming like that, is this sculling drill. So sculling here with the pull buoy between the legs, head up out of the water. The only way for a swimmer to move forwards here is to ensure that the fingertips are below the wrist and the wrist is below the elbow. If we take a look at that underneath the water, I'm using this sculling action in and out like I'm mixing hot and cold water together, just like so. Now, if I try to mimic what Scott was doing, I'm actually going backwards. Now, he doesn't purposefully bring his hand up, he's just trying to make his stroke as long as he possibly can. He's had in his idea that he's got to get under 40 strokes per 50 and that'll make him more efficient. He's got down to 28, but where does it stop? Is he going to be happier with 24, even if he gets down to 30 minutes for a kilometre? It's not efficient swimming. Now, the reason I use this as an example is because during this session, Scott managed to knock off 15 seconds per 50 metres off his swimming. 30 seconds, 100 in the space of 30 minutes back in the water by working on these drills. Now, I'm sure all of us sat here would be really happy if we knocked off 30 seconds, wouldn't we? We would. This guy was disappointed, though, when I revealed to him that he'd taken his stroke rate up to 54 strokes per minute and was taking 34 strokes per length. He was taking 6 more strokes than he was prior to the session. I said, well, I can't be swimming more efficiently if I'm taking more strokes. He actually went away from the session disappointed and I never saw him again. Believe it or not. So my point that I want to raise here is that when you're working with an overglider like Scott, okay, look at how much rotation he's got, 90 degrees, he's totally unbalanced and unstable in the water. When you're working with an overglider like Scott, you're not saying the solution is to turn your arms over quicker. If I gave Scott a tempo trainer and took him straight up to 54 and he was still doing this, he's going to feel like he's driving down the freeway with his handbrake on. We've got to release the handbrake, we've got to get him coming in, keeping the elbow higher, we've got to resist the temptation to pause out in front of the head, and that will naturally help the stroke rate to come up a little bit. A really good thing to do with an overglider is at the end of the session, get them using a little tempo trainer. I eyeballed it and by that point thought, yeah, 54 is where he's looking quite good. So we put it on at 54, he did a lap, he's swimming well under 60 seconds for the 50 metres. I said, how did that feel? He said, oh, it actually felt really good. I felt very much in control of my breathing. I said, well, that's a good result, isn't it? Then told him that he was doing 34 strokes per 50. He wasn't too happy about that. But what you can do then, had I had a tempo trainer at this point, it's before I was actually using them on a regular basis, I could have actually put him back down at 33 strokes per minute and said, go away now and swim at 33. And immediately you'll feel like he's sinking in the water, like he's slowing himself down quite significantly. Now, on the course last week, we had this lady, Merle, who swims, she's Finland's first ever female English Channel swimmer. Great swimmer, she swam across in 2013. Beautiful, smooth freestyle stroke when she swam. 45 strokes per minute, so a little bit quicker than this guy here. And we did the ramp test with her last week, and we actually identified, we took her from like 42 up to 60 or something like that. We found out that when she was doing the exercise, she was swimming really quite well at 54 strokes per minute. But then I said, okay, let's just keep experimenting with this a little bit. Let's take you a little bit higher. I said, let's put it at 68, which is Rebecca Abington's stroke rate. And she did it, and she said, oh, yeah, but I feel like I was working really hard. I said, that's because you're still maintaining your 6-beat leg kick. Just try and go, and she was a very skillful swimmer. I said, go with 2-beat leg kick at 68, and immediately she felt significantly better. She then did the CSS time trial, and she was averaging 70 strokes per minute during the CSS time trial, and knocked out a sub-6 minute 400 with a threshold pace worked out at 1 minute 31 per 100 metres. In the filming, she was only swimming at just under 2 minutes per 100 metres. And that was her, and she said the same thing. She said, surely it's going to be harder, surely it's going to be less efficient if I turn my arms over quicker. But what we're not doing is we're not saying just turn your arms over quicker. We've got to work out why they're going a little bit slow. Sarah, for you, the reason you're slow because we're pushing down. In her case, Telly's stroke, she was actually just pausing out in front of the head. She went away, didn't she, with a massive smile on her face. She's like, right, this is how I'm going to, it's like a new lease on life. This is how I'm going to swim like Shelley Taylor-Smith now and go along there. She's a very talented swimmer with that. So just watch out for that. So anyway, we were talking about David. So David, here at the front there. So we can just see that stall. So one thing that you could do is you could have a go, recognising, okay, it's from right hand that's stalling. Other aspects of your stroke actually look really quite nice, but you could get one of those agility paddles on your right hand. It won't let you stall in that position, because if you drop your elbow and pull back, especially if you're not gripping it hard with the thumb, you'll pull back and the paddle will fall off. So it'll teach you to come in here and keep that arm moving. And like I say, the fault of an overglider is that they stall at the front. They spend all the time within the stroke at the front, not actively doing anything. Whereas a true smooth, they still have front quadrant freestyle swimming. A true smooth would actually spend the time on the catch, actively propelling themselves forwards. So within a smooth, you don't see the stall and sudden rapid pull through. You see a much more smooth caress of the water, like you're getting that traction on the water there. So on your right-hand side, that's what we need to work on trying to achieve there with the stroke. Generally speaking, body position not too bad. You're looking down to the bottom of the pool, but you're a big, tall guy with long legs, and your head position there appears to be quite good for your stroke. In fact, when you looked up forwards, your legs did start to sink down. So I wouldn't change that, but I would work on the timing. The same stroke that I showed you for when you're looking back on this, the same drill I should say that showed Roy, the Unco drill with the paddle on that lead hand would also be a good exercise for you to do there, David. But it's that stall. The biggest thing is the stall, and again you can see that you're holding onto your breath. In fact, you hold onto your breath just before that right arm pulls through. It's like you're consciously thinking, I'm going to pull through now. Okay, and stall and then pull through, and it just creates a little bit of tension within the stroke there. Okay.